Hello, good day, everyone. Welcome to Critical Faculty. It's probably the conversation you've been waiting for. Um, uh, about a week ago, a famous debate has taken place. I was looking forward to it for quite some time to put an end to this ridiculous charade by a specific doctor whose content is mostly on YouTube and not in published papers. And I've got the person who actually did, in my opinion, a fantastic job, not beating around the bush, exposing him for what I think for the fraud he is. Um, Hello, Dave. How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
Very good. Very good. Thank you so much for coming to Critical Faculty one more time. Um, Today we are going to be discussing the debate. First, maybe we'll start with the scientific aspects, and we're going to get into um, the scenes, the surrounding the debate, the audience, the moderator with his wig. I was very distracted by his wig. um, um, and then we're going to talk about your experience with James Stewart. But you've been looking forward to this for quite some time. It's been a couple of years in the making, I guess.
Yeah, well, I mean, he issued the debate challenge some time ago. I think something like 2 years ago. I didn't take it seriously because he was just kind of grandstanding, and I think he issued that before I even issued my response to his series. So he didn't really know what I had conjured up there. So that just kind of simmered. But then when he came back more recently and made this next series that was really aggressively attacking me and slandering me and just cartoons of Dave and just all this, I was like, yeah, we're not doing this. So remember the debate thing? Yeah, that's going to happen now. And I'm going to humiliate you. So it was just as with everything, always on his end, always pushing and triggering and making this happen. So that's why.
Yeah. Um, the debate was quite interesting for me because it was a home ground. That's Rice University. This is where he teaches. Apparently, the actual
Yeah.
venue is in his own classroom. So he's on home turf. He's got his students, probably the Christian group, and you can feel he was feeling at home. He started the conversation by saying, "I'm not an experienced debater.
Yeah.
He doesn't know what he's waiting for here," and then the board the using the choke and almost like being in a classroom. That was a very bizarre move by him.
Yeah, a bizarre move. Honestly, not a bad move strategically from him for him because it's the only thing that gave him the illusion of having any kind of upper hand to not his students to his church group. His church group fell for it. Yeah, so a good strategy on his part because he had nothing, so that was really all he had. But nevertheless, to anyone with any kind of ability for critical thinking, they could see through the pageantry of what he was doing.
Well, I think you rebutted his allegations quite nicely because you've eventually wrote it on the blackboard, so it must be true, and the
Yeah,
audience loved it then.
sure. I mean, there's really the only words I ever needed to write with chalk.
Yeah,
That's all
no
we needed.
clues. That
Hmm.
was classic. So he started with, we'll get a little bit into the science and the problem with the abiogenesis. He called it the time of the gap, or the gap of time, or some some stupid twist about God of the gaps. He's saying, oh well, it's because we weren't there, as if he's doing science for the first time. We can't really tell. If you think as a proper scientist, we do that all the time. Go
Yeah.
back and do inferences and come up with all sort of
Let me just I rarely steel man anything that James says, but here's an opportunity to steel man. I think what he meant by time of the gaps is that there could be someone who's not well versed in the sciences that would say, well, given millions of years, anything could happen. Right. I think that's what's meant by the time of the gaps argument, or it's not really an argument. In fact, nobody really says that. But sure, if someone was to say, "Oh, given a long enough time, you'll get life," that doesn't really adequately address the question of how abiogenesis could have occurred. Nevertheless, it is true. when you have millions of years, a lot of different things can happen. So it's not really a totally nonsensical thing to say. Whereas God of the Gaps, I mean, everybody knows what God of the Gaps is, and everybody knows that James believes in the God of the Gaps, even though he refuses to explicitly say so. But by definition, that is his God. That is, that's what he believes. So.
Do you think the whole premise is predicated on a classic argument from ignorance? I don't know, therefore.
Well, yes, but I mean that's what he's ideologically bound to believing, right? Scripture tells him that God created life, so that's what he believes. And it's scripture over science for him, ironically, because he's a scientist. So that's what he's ideologically bound to believing. Then he plays this semantic game with his viewers and in his own mind, I imagine, to try to undercut, to try to neutralize any science that runs contrary to his religious beliefs. So the kind of science he does in his lab, it's not a problem. He makes graphene and nanocars, and this has nothing to do with God or anything like that. But anything about origin of life, anything about evolution, I mean, he's outspoken about evolution too, but he doesn't talk about it as much because he's completely clueless about biology. As it turns out, he's clueless about origin of life research as well, but he's able to fake it because he can use the chemistry vernacular and trick people into thinking he knows what he's talking about.
Well, he seems to be clueless about lots of things. You've mentioned the situation where, when you do the washing of basaltic rock with pure water and oxygen peroxide to for any contamination, and he did not know that basalt rock contained
Magnesium.
Magnesium, yes,
Rich in magnesium.
rich
So
in magnesium.
it's actually twofold. The error is twofold, and this is in his content where he's slandering Stephen Benner, telling him his research is stupid. So by criticizing the washings, and I highlighted this in my opening statement for a very specific reason, when he appears to be very diligent, or he presents himself as diligent in going into the supplemental materials and looking at the specific methodology, he's actually just clueless. He's showing how clueless he is. So he says, "Oh, Benner, you washed all the magnesium off the basalt. That would interfere with the processes you're trying to get." It's like, no, there's magnesium in the thing, in the basaltic surface. There's magnesium. And then secondly, this is his other thing, is to complain that human intervention makes things not prebiotic. But the problem is the current Earth is not prebiotic. There's life everywhere. So
Sure.
by using hydrogen peroxide and washing with ultra pure water, you're getting rid of bacteria and other biological contaminants to make it more prebiotic. The same with like running a reaction under argon. Oh, well, you ran it under argon. It's like, yeah, because there's oxygen here now that wasn't there then. That's why. So every time he tries to talk about methodology making it not prebiotic, he's just demonstrating that he has no idea what he's talking about. And I think potentially not even lying, but just genuinely not understanding the research. So
that was going to be my next question, because God, I mean, if he was like that, because I was going to probe, is it competency, or is he playing to an ignorant audience who are not interested in science but interested in proving their gods?
It's both. Yeah, it's both. I mean, he's definitely actively lying about research, but I think he also at times genuinely does not understand the research that he's referencing.
Right. The physics, chemistry, biochemistry, biology. I mean, that's usually the sequence. And for a chemist, he does not seem to understand, like he talked about autocatalysis and the word itself contain the meaning that it does that itself. It's self-sustained. It does not need an outside
auto
factor.
self. Yeah.
But why doesn't he understand that? That's like, it's in the words.
He doesn't want to. And I mean, I told him about it, but the thing with autocatalysis, so he like the thing is that systems chemistry is so central to origin of life research. And it's once you start looking at systems chemistry and you start to learn about how systems of molecules can exhibit Darwinian principles. So there is actual evolution going on the molecular level prior to the emergence of any living system. This is just it just becomes so obviously elucidating how life can have emerged from sets of molecules. It's just too hot for him to discuss. So he just pretends it doesn't exist. He's made 2 series now. One was like 10 hours. The other one was like 8 hours. This is like between 10 and 20 hours of content as here's how to learn about origin of life research. And he never brings up systems chemistry a single time. I mean, this is like, are you kidding me? This is like the most important thing that you should be talking about the whole time, so there's no better demonstration of the bad faith nature of his approach to the topic.
And he brings within the conversation, within the first 10 minutes intro, the classic Behe argument, the irreducible complexity. He calls it something slightly different, but
He talked about specified information.
Specified information. So that's maybe
Dembski. That's Dembski, not Behe. Yeah, I'm gonna debunk that later at some point. Yeah.
Yeah, it's but when it comes to the complexity situation, like polymers aren't, correct me if I'm wrong, aren't polymers is a group of monomers put together to create that polymer, the complex sequence. So everything that looks complex had an initial humble beginning of even simpler form. Why does he come to the very last scene? So, that's too complex. How did it emerge?
Well, this is classic Discovery Institute playbook. I mean, this is what creationists say, right? There's a code. They need, so it's the same with irreducible complexity. So Behe says, look, this looks like a machine, and machines have creators, so life has a creator. Same thing here. This looks like a code, and codes have creators. So this has a creator. This is all sleight of hand stuff. So they're talking about, they try to make up this terminology to imply that what the information in nucleic acids is just too crazy. It just couldn't have. It's like, look, the information is the sequence of nucleotides, right? If nucleotides are going to polymerize, you're going to get a sequence, and that's the information. Now, the trick is, by chance, for certain sequences to arise that produce ribozymes with certain activity, such that they do some interesting, catalysis. So yeah, there are many, many, many sequences possible. And then of those potential sequences, certain ones will have interesting properties, catalytic activity, autocatalytic activity, or they do something else. They make a short peptide, they make a tripeptide or something. So that's interesting, but that's where, just given astronomical chances, even things with infinitesimal odds are sure to occur. So if you have trillions and trillions of opportunities of these nucleotides polymerizing and making all these different sequences, you're gonna get some interesting ones that do something cool. You know what I mean? And the problem is that anytime you have something like that, if you have an enzyme or you have whatever it is, they will say, look, see, it's 1 in 10 to the blah, 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 big scary number to get that sequence. But that's not the only sequence that will perform that function, right? There's a tremendous amount of variability in that sequence, right? It's not that every single residue has to be exactly that. If you're talking about a protein now, let's say we're talking about amino acids, right? Each amino acid residue has a tremendous amount of variability. It's not like each one has to be exactly that one. So that's something that they never talk about. But anyway, the whole thing is just pseudoscience, the specified information thing.
Dembski is called specified complexity. I can't remember the exact term.
Yeah,
it was the computer scientists who came up with a number. Obviously, that to that power, they give you a crazy number to tell you the likelihood of this is happening. It's got to be a miracle. But then.
That's all they do. Big number, little big scary number, but it doesn't actually mean anything.
You'll see it in the fine tuning and the cosmological argument. You see the exact same thing. But isn't that a teleological argument, which is the situation's reversed? Wouldn't be nature just acting the way it is based on initial conditions and laws of physics and chemistry, and then that whole emergence gets befitted into a certain reality, and either it stays alive because it can, or it dies off like the rest of the 99.99% of population that couldn't.
Correct. And that's why systems chemistry is so important, because when we're looking at sets of molecules that can self-replicate, obviously you're introducing a situation where interesting sequences are going to perpetuate. This is just statistical dynamics, right? Things that are able to more efficiently self-replicate will proliferate. They will predominate in nature. And so that's why it's so incredible that we've already in the past 20 years begun demonstrating these principles in sets of molecules, because this is a key feature of biological life. in the absence of biological life, right? We're saying that chemistry exhibits these principles. And this is you can't argue this. This has been empirically demonstrated. Gerald Joyce was the first, and then others since then. It's a thriving field that showing these principles on the chemical level.
Another straw man, or I'm not sure, it must be deliberate by now, but we see it quite a lot, is the presumption of the current complexity. So it happens with cosmology as well. They look at the current situation. It happened in biology and evolution. Say, look at the diversity of all the creatures. This cannot be a coincidence. This is too complex. Even Immanuel Kant said, "You'll never get an Isaac Newton for a blade of grass." But by reversing and going and rewinding back, things do tend to take simpler forms. The Mrs. Grin, the 7 characteristics of a living being, did they have to be all in existence at the beginning? Or life could have been a lot more simpler. You don't need the 7 characteristics of a living organism.
Yeah, I mean, it's insanely simpler. I mean, the very basic criteria of like self-replication and metabolism and things like that. Yeah, I believe that those had to be in place. But the problem with somebody like James, and so this is something where he's clearly reacted to my criticisms, because in his early content, he would show features of modern eukaryotic cells, not even prokaryotic, modern eukaryotic cells, and like transcription and translation and all. Wow, look at the crazy stuff. You think this just floated together? No, nobody thinks that. This is the product of 4 billion years of evolution. And even and then he reacted to that and started showing modern bacteria. And it's like, dude, I know that prokaryotes are simpler than eukaryotes, but this is still the product of 4 billion years of evolution. The first cell did not look anything remotely like a modern bacterium. So you have to keep going back and stripping all these things away. But then, nevertheless, it's still a game where they try to pretend that they'll take a modern bacterium and take things away and go, how simple can it get? And you're still missing the point. And so he finally has reacted to that, because in all of my criticisms, he shows like, here are all the genes you need. Here are all the DNA coded. No DNA, zero DNA. The first living organism had zero DNA, or according to the RNA world model and other models, at least. I mean, I'm just saying that this is what OOL researchers are proposing, that there was no DNA. So finally, he, at least in the debate, didn't pretend that you needed DNA, because he knew I was going to hammer him if he said that. So now he's finally talking about RNA, like our actual discussion. But this is what he does in his content, and the people don't know what's going on. They don't know what RNA, the church people don't know what RNA is, DNA, what the difference is. But that's what all of his content has been like. And so, I think he tried his best to strip away a lot of those straw men, so that I wouldn't have as many opportunities to hammer him. But yeah, I mean, he's still very, very, he presented it in that way of stripping away features of like a modern bacterium, and that's just not it. That's just not what anyone is proposing in the field.
It's cleverly used in the debate. I'm not sure if it's gullible or overly ambitious statements by, like, the likes of Shostak and Lee Cronin, and maybe Benner at some point, that life is going to be, we're going to have life prepared in the lab in the next couple of years.
Yeah.
Do you think maybe people should stop saying that and don't overcommit?
Yeah, well, the thing is, when he does that, he's quote mining anyway. Like the Jack Shostak quote, that was a quote mine. Like what Shostak was saying was, he was talking about protocell assembly given the constituent parts, and he's not necessarily one of the chemists that's working on the prebiotic syntheses to the building blocks. So he definitely took that out of context. I'm doing a follow-up video, and I'm going to show all the quote mines and all the misquoting and everything. With Lee Cronin, I mean, see, the problem here is the conflation of the creation of artificial life with determining the ancient pathways to the first protocell. They're not really the same. There's obviously overlap of the fields, but synthetic biology is not origin of life research. They're not identical, right? And so, I mean, honestly, Lee Cronin is a little bit more fixated on the creation of artificial life, and so he's considered an origin of life researcher. I mean, he does work, in that field at least tangentially, but he's not doing what necessarily some of the people who are actively trying to find what these prebiotic pathways were to give the first life. They're not the same field, right? So anyway, even if somebody says, oh, I'm going to get life, and then they didn't get it, it just kind of doesn't really have that much to do with the study of what happened prebiotically. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. Who came up with the debate's title?
So I did. So
Oh,
James
clever.
won.
Very
Well,
clever.
yeah, he wanted. By the way, it took a month of back and forth by email to get this thing going because he was just being slippery as a snake. But he wanted it to be: does science explain the origin of life, or does chemistry explain the origin of life? Knowing full well that no, it doesn't immaculately, perfectly explain. We don't know. Nobody says that we know exactly what happened. We certainly don't. Partially because for each step of the pathway, we have too many options that are viable. So that's what makes it hard to know exactly. It's like, how did amino acids come about? Well, some came from space, some came from Strucker synthesis, some came. So we don't know. We'll probably never know exactly what happened. But anyway, I pushed back on that because I was like, look, your mantra is this. You go on the internet all over the place, go, we're clueless. Scientists are clueless. We're clueless. Clueless, 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 clueless. So that's the title of the debate. If you don't like it, it's because you know that the position is indefensible and you're going to get embarrassed. So he accepted it, but then he immediately tried to redefine the meaning,
Yeah.
or just
It's a
recontextualize
clever
the whole
one
debate.
because you won it from the word go, because we know
Oh yeah,
since the Miller-Urey experiment, there are so many leaps about understanding how things would have emerged. Still, some questions persist, but
yeah,
to compare us to, by the way, a very young science, and I'm not sure why people are so impatient. It's only been probably the last 20, 30 years of the serious stuff it was really happening. So it's a
yeah.
very young science, and I bet you once we get to know the origin of life, the goalpost is going to be shifted one more time. Say, well, you know what? God made it that way. That's how my God created.
Well, if you want to, that's how my God created the universe with these laws in place such that life can emerge. But the problem, I mean, not the problem, but the thing is that that doesn't bother me, right? Because cosmology doesn't have even as many answers as origin of life research in
True.
terms of the nuts and bolts of it. I mean, cosmology, past time 10 to the negative 36 seconds, or 10 to the, I forget the exact increment, past a certain time has increasingly better and better information and better models to
10 to the
describe
minus
the,
30. Yeah, that's
yeah,
you were spot on. Yeah,
yeah. But
numbers.
at t equals 0, I don't know, man. If you want to say it's God that went like that, I don't care. It doesn't bother me. It's not, as the current time, specifically unscientific, or at least it doesn't contradict science, I should say.
Sure.
Whereas God going, let me put some molecules to get, that's just ridiculous. That just it's has nothing to do with science at all,
Yeah, and it's
So
an unfalsifiable premise. It's something that you can never falsify. So
yeah,
it's going to have to be a matter of belief, and you just leave it alone, and you just do your science, and we
sure.
continue to build tech.
And guess what? If religious people want to have that belief privately in their homes and in their minds, I'm not going to knock down your front door and shove systems chemistry research in your face. I don't care. James is the one that is a toxic influence that is spreading lies and misinformation. It's not that he's going on in there and saying, I believe in God and the scripture, and therefore I believe that God created life, and end of story. No, he's slandering researchers in the field and lying all over the internet. This is a very toxic and negative influence on society that promotes science denial, and it has a trickle down effect where people go, oh, they're lying about the origin of life research scientists, they're lying about that, and they're lying about the vaccines, and they're lying about climate, that's how science deniers think, right? It's all connected. So it has a very tangible negative ramification on society that needs to be neutralized. So that's why I do it.
Now, let's explain to people a little bit, to the audience, about the scientific method and how do you debunk or protest or contest scientific ideas. Because my understanding is uh, science papers need to be published, they get peer reviewed, and eventually they're verified, and you get scientific consensus. You don't go on YouTube or tabloids along with the Kardashians in the next article to write in a blog post your position on things. But it seems that James Stewart never really published anything viable to that effect.
Well, no, not in this topic, and which is rendered all the more embarrassing due to the fact that he is a scientist and he understands how to publish literature. In fact, he brags about his big number of publications, largely due to the incredible number of graduate students he has. But so he knows how to publish papers, right? And so and he knows that if he had valid criticisms, he could publish these. In fact. My favorite question during the Q&A was someone grilling him as to why he does not go through the proper channels and publish his critiques in peer-reviewed journals. And what was the funniest, I mean, I knew what his response was going to be because he's given this response before, that he's not going to engage with the scientists. He's going to go straight to the public, which is very telling in and of itself. But in his response, he specifically said, it's very hard for me to publish anything that's critical of the field. Others have done it. Bob Shapiro has done it, etc. He listed people who have published critiques. So it's like, why can't you, buddy? Right? If Shapiro can do it, why can't you? Either his critiques are legitimate and yours aren't, or there's some kind of conspiracy against the Jesus people or something like that, right? He really shot himself in the foot by listing people who have indeed. And Shapiro's critiques were taken. I mean, they're a couple decades old at this point. I mean, I think this was the 90s actually. So it was before literally the entire field of systems chemistry. It was before most of what we know now about the main pathways. So it's a little bit archaic at this point, but it was taken seriously by the field. It was like, okay, we need to figure out how to get beyond relay synthesis. We need to figure out, like, it was an accurate criticism of the status of the field at the time. That's not what James does. He lies about it. That's very, very different. That's why he cannot publish his critiques, because they're full of lies. And that's why he pushes them on the public instead, because they don't know what he's talking about. That's all there is to it.
One of the things about science is if you are going to have a competing hypothesis, you got to provide well-established research. So, for example, you might say the RNA world would explain away that the simplicity was needed before the complications of a DNA. Or you can have a panspermia, and you explain it with data and information, and you can explain that the building blocks are in abundance and in space and stuff like that. But things like abiogenesis in the ID movement, and that's why they're called pseudoscience, is they don't give you a model. All what they're trying to say is whatever you're saying, too difficult to happen. The numbers are not stacking up.
Yeah.
How that's not science. That's like
no, it's not science. It's objectively not science. But the thing is that even if James doesn't have a model, he doesn't have to have a model, right? It's okay to publish a critique without offering an alternate solution, and others have done this, and you can do this in the literature, but it's just that his critiques are not valid, right? That's the point, right? When he's criticizing something, he's either lying about it or he's just not understanding what they're doing. So that's why, oh, you washed it, or you'd use the argon, or you're doing things. Yeah, buddy, these are mimicking geochemical cycles, or these are specifically trying to recreate natural cycles or things, right? This is testing something prebiotic, and he's just not comprehending. So that's why he can never publish any of this stuff, because anybody who works in the field would read anything he says and go, this guy is a clown. He doesn't even know the first thing about what we do. I mean, he really genuinely doesn't. Like, he likes to pretend that being a synthetic chemist is all you need to understand this field. It's not. Right? Synthetic chemists are not primed to look at something like systems chemistry and have any idea of what's going on in there, right? It's just not, it's not related to traditional synthetic chemistry.
Yeah, considering we were trying to replicate initial natural conditions, and on that he came up with that cartoonish about the primordial soup being hit by lightning, and you have a slithering creature crawling out.
Yeah. And so I wanted to make I really wanted to because I knew that most of what we were going to be talking about was going to be so esoteric that it's just going over everybody's heads, and they'll just, oh, James is right because I like him better. So I really wanted to make it a point, and some people are like, oh, ad hominem, ad hominem. No, the guy's a liar. Everything he says about this topic is a lie. I'm going to nail him on some lies where you don't really need to understand science. Just, he said this and it ain't true. So that's why I nailed him on this thing that he says all the time in all of his videos. Primordial soup is the molecules and then lightning and then a slithering creature. And it's in all the textbooks. It's in the college and this is what we teach graduates. It's bananas. It is not true. That's not what textbooks say. So I showed the quote. I showed what textbooks actually say, and then I railed him on it. And said, you can't show this. You don't have a picture of it showing this. It doesn't show this. And he just started getting really angry and ran to the board and wrote clueless and just went onto his pageantry because he cannot admit that he lied. He just can't do it. But he's there in the moment, and that's where he got really agitated because
it started to come, and then suddenly the voices started to be raised and raised, covering your own voice and covering everybody else's voice. He acted like insane at some point. I thought that's insane. That's like the Holy Ghost is speaking through him.
This is what happens when you press a narcissist on this stuff, right? He has to maintain this facade for his viewers and for himself. I think there's a lot of turmoil going on in there. And so when you show someone how clearly wrong they are and they refuse to react to that information and adjust and change, I mean, everybody uses the term cognitive dissonance, and I think it gets overused and used incorrectly. But here, I'm using this correctly. He's experiencing cognitive dissonance because he understands science, but he's denying science that challenges his faith. And that's where the rage comes from. I mean, it's very clear.
And we always get with that sort of attitude, that element of conspiracy. The world is trying to suppress the existence of God. The cosmologists and all these famous people and all these very important people that changed the lives of many, and tech is being created on the back of these findings. We're talking about things that we actually use on day-to-day basis. Yet he's convinced, and the likes of him will be convinced, that there is some sort of a hierarchy up there, a scientific one, that he's working so hard in the background trying to suppress the existence of God. Why is that?
Or to ban religious people from certain inner circles or things like that. I mean, why is that? I mean, it's because he has to say something, right? He has to conclude something. Why can't he publish this stuff? Why isn't he in the National Academy of Sciences? Well, because you take a big dump all over the work of people in there, right? Gerald Joyce, Donna Blackman, Jack Shostak, they're in there, and you slander them. Why would they invite you to join their ranks? Right? It has nothing to do with you being religious. I'm sure there's religious people in there, but religious scientists that are successful, or a good religious scientist is able to separate those realms. He pretends to, but he does not. He certainly does not.
Yeah, like I guess Francis Collins, the director of the Genome Project, then the guy who was having a walk and saw a waterfall frozen in 3 sections. So he went on his knees and accepted Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior. Imagine if it was frozen into 2. Would he accepted the Persian God, the dualistic,
a binary God or something? Yeah.
It's incredible. But what he did quite successfully is once he inside the lab, he did science.
Yeah.
And we respect him for that. We respect that person for that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But he can never do that. There are certain people who would always, that sort of dogma will interfere with their scientific integrity.
And to be fair, it does not interfere with James's research, because it doesn't have anything to do with it. And if James was not constantly going on these tirades, these very public anti-science tirades, nobody would care. I wouldn't care. I wouldn't care if there's this Christian scientist who does material science, but also believes God created life. I don't care. It's a personal belief. It's just being that toxic influence that is poisoning the minds of the public. Someone has to intervene, and no one was doing it for this guy. Nobody. So I took it upon myself. So it's purely that you can have your faith, and it can even be unscientific. I mean, faith generally is unscientific, but it's not. It's just about the public thing. You're poisoning people's minds, and it has to be neutralized.
Well, his relationship to the Discovery Institute, I mean, in the beginning of the 21st century, they were quite active. They have the Behe, the Dembski, the
Hmm.
Meyer, all these people, and started to fade away. And, they lost many trials. In Google search now, you Google, the term is there, it's a pseudoscience. So, yet they faded away, but it looks like James Tour is the only viable scientist that they can have on board and became their cover boy.
Yes. Yeah. He is the only working, actively publishing scientist they have. They have people with doctorates, but I mean, most of them, like if they have a doctorate, never published any research. They just got the doctorate to appear more credible for their apologetics. Somebody like Behe published a couple of papers, but ultimately shifted over to books full of lies. So yeah, they're it's a bunch of clowns over there. So James is their shining knight. So for him to be humiliated by a YouTuber, it's not a very good look for him, and that's why the damage control over there is through the roof.
So,
So
as you know, my half of my background is of a Muslim background, and this is a funny story now because James Tour is going to be subtitled, and they take all his work as a proof for the existence of God. Very very bad translation of what he's saying. So we're talking about a misrepresentation of a misrepresentation. So
mhm.
it's really really far from what he's actually saying. And then this is going to be popularized as here we go, an atheist has been debunked. So I'm going to be making very sure that I'll have my Arabic conversations on that to represent your position quite properly. Because the
Very
Muslim
good.
world has been waiting for this, and we have a clubhouse debate coming very soon in Arabic, and there'll be some Arabic conversation with PhD biologist in Germany, an Egyptian guy that I know. He loved your conversation, and we're gonna actually open a conversation in Arabic, trying to explain your position and
Oh,
why
great.
the other position is not scientific.
Hmm.
It is very important. Um, so. Now let's go about. We've covered a little bit of the science. Let's talk about the actual atmosphere. Before the debate started, how were you treated? What was the atmosphere like?
It was fine. I mean, the people running it were professional and just strictly concerned with putting on a good production.
Right,
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't interact with James much either, but I mean, obviously, given the way he tries to present himself, he wasn't like rude to me or anything. Like he,
right.
struggled through. He, tried to get some small talk going for 10 minutes or so, and I was happy to humor him with that. It's not like I'm gonna like, no, you suck, like whatever. Like we're
Yeah.
here, might as well talk about our kids or whatever. So no, it's not like no, I wasn't mistreated in any way at all, except for during the debate.
Yeah.
But no, no complaints, no complaints really. I mean, other than that, like I mean, in terms of how the debate was structured itself, it was definitely skewed in his favor. He definitely reserved a bunch of seats for his church people. He had the
Right.
moderator in his pocket. He had his mic turned up louder than mine. Like
Right.
definitely trying to stack it as much as he could, but he can't like mute me. So, I got to talk. So,
Because I thought the moderator was almost non-existent. There were so many times where he should have intervened just to get clarity of voices and say how
yeah,
we can't hear you guys.
I don't care that I didn't need anyone to intervene. I knew what was going to happen. I knew it was going to devolve that way because I'm very aggressively exposing him and he's a shouter. So I knew that was going to happen and I didn't need anyone to intervene, which is why I didn't care who the moderator was. But what bothered me was when he did choose to intervene, he tried to correct me 3 times. And each time he was wrong, like not trivially wrong, like, are you serious? Wrong. Like, why did you just open your mouth to say that? And then so it was to get like he was definitely primed on that and kind of asked to do that as much as possible, and that was to give the illusion of me being corrected. And then each time when I corrected him, it elicited a gasp from the audience of, "Oh, Dave is pushing back against the moderator. How dare he?" It's like, well, did you hear the dumb thing he just said? I don't like. What do you want? What he said is ridiculous, and I'm going to correct him. So
So most of the audiences were chemistry students.
I don't know. Well, I mean, there was a big like church faction, and then there were a
Mhm.
lot of students. I imagine primarily science students, and definitely after the debate, there was a long line of people who wanted to talk to me, and a lot of people said, you know, you helped me through this class, that class, etc. So definitely, yeah, no, a lot of science students. Yeah, it's hard to say. It's hard to say exactly what the breakdown was.
Yeah, because so a lot of the questions were really challenging to him, and it came from like
Yeah.
very smart students. I think they knew their chemistry, and
Yes.
the questions were quite good, I thought.
Yes. Yeah, that was great because, you know, despite the boos and the pushback, none of those people have the capacity to formulate a coherent question. So when it came to the Q&A, it was primarily smart people challenging James on his script.
Yeah,
So
there was one religious dude who made no sense whatsoever. He was, wanted to suck up to James Stewart, but then he ended up saying, "Well, I would like you to debunk Farina's cosmology," and even James Stewart says, "Oh, I don't do cosmology."
it was the only moment we were in this on the same page of going, what is this idiot talking about? And I cracked the code though. I figured out what he meant is that he is bothered by the fact that I have put out numerous electric universe debunks, and that's his little thing that he likes. So that's why he was mad at me.
Um, when it comes to faith, I mean, this is going to be a big dilemma. Well, you and I are not concerned with what people believe in their homes. I think we're concerned with the truth. We
Yep.
want our convictions and our understanding of the world around us to be as close as possible to what's real, so we can help ourselves. We've got lots of challenges coming our way, problems coming to this on this planet, and if we are delusional about how we are going to be handling ourselves in the future, we could self-annihilate. So we have a pragmatic stance on I want to make sure that my understanding of the world around me is consistent with the reality. Then comes people who don't just want to believe in what they want to believe in their homes, but they want to apply that to the scientific method, and they want to reshape reality to suit their narrative. I mean? This is dangerous. This could be potentially quite dangerous.
Yeah, I mean, you're telling me. Yeah, I mean, it's the infiltration of science, the infiltration of politics. I mean, what we're essentially talking about is Christian nationalism trying to erode the separation of church and state. So where does that happen? I mean, that happens in every aspect of society. So, you know, what the Discovery Institute tries to do is say, hey, like intelligent design is also science. Maybe that should be in public schools, right? It's like, no, it's religion. So you're trying to erode church and state. This is federal funded education. You want
Mhm.
religion in it. That's an erosion of church and state. But they try to pretend that that's all there is, that it's a scientific endeavor. But you know, the wedge document leaked very long time ago, 20 years ago or whatever it is. It shows very clearly the intent of the organization, right, for design theory to permeate all aspects of social and political life, right? So we're talking about theocracy. The wealthy funders want theocracy. That's what they want. They want the Handmaid's Tale, right? That's what they want. So there has to be pushback here. There has to be pushback
Hmm.
on every level, right? There has to be a zero tolerance policy on this. So no, intelligent design in public schools. No, sorry, religion does not belong in public schools. Period. Unless you're learning about it in an academic way, because this is very intimately linked with all the rollbacks on women's rights and you know, banning abortion and you know, South Carolina trying to get
Hmm.
legislation passed to make abortion punishable by death. So it's just like this is very dark
You're kidding.
stuff. No, that's current
Punishable
read.
by death.
Punishable by death penalty for getting an abortion. And in some cases, people are trying to do the same thing for miscarriages if it can be shown that there was intent, right? So, first of all, how are you going to prove that? Second of all, do they have any idea how common miscarriages are? My wife had 5 miscarriages for us to get 2 kids. They happen all the time.
Yeah.
So this is just setting up ways to jail subversive individuals, essentially, right? If you want to get a theocracy in place, you need to be able to jail anyone who is subversive to to the powers that be. So we need all these little ways to be able to put people in jail by saying, you did this, you did that, and you know, this is how we get biblical law as federal law. And so it's very dark stuff. I mean, it's like, look, I'm not pretending like, oh, this is around the corner tomorrow and it's definitely going to happen. Like, if it happen, I doubt it will happen, but if it does, it will take decades. But this is the path. This is there are people who are actively trying to promote this, and it needs to be fought tooth and nail.
Because I live in Australia, and we don't have this issue. It's not as prevalent. New Zealand is the same. Pretty much Europe is quite secular, and
Yeah,
they don't care. Scandinavia is even almost atheistic
most
society.
secular place in the world. Yeah,
Yeah, and then you go to the United States, and considering the beginning, the founding fathers, mostly deists and probably non-theists,
yes,
and the most secular constitution in the world, trying to say, well, God and things like that. While we respect them, they don't have a place in our policies to emerge and end up being in a situation where the U.S. is perceived to be almost have elements of very religious appetite.
fascistic. Yeah, it's
Well, how do you explain that from the beginning? It should have emerged into the banner of all secularism and the separation of church and state, but we still see it quite prevalently in the U.S.
I mean, I really don't know. It's a very good question, and I don't know that anyone has answered it adequately. Perhaps some historians have. I mean, I don't know if there's something about the very tumultuous way in which the American population grew as mixtures of immigrants from all of these places. And very recently, there's no antiquity. I mean, I guess Australia also doesn't
Yeah,
have antiquity. So, I mean, I just don't know. It's a great question, and I can't answer it, but it's enormously problematic. Yeah.
yeah. Do you think it's maybe there's the two political parties in the U.S., and one is that the ultra conservative, the right wing, which doesn't necessarily need to be theistic. We've seen right wings movements in the U.S. now that are atheists, but they're conservative, so they don't have to be
Sure.
bound together. But could that be a connection? And there are lots of older generations are afraid of losing their way.
But I think that that's a response, right? When you have an ultra conservative party that is trying to control a people and give and propagandize them, they're responding to what is going to work the best. And they found that being very Jesus-y, right, being presenting very religious narrative is what works the best to polarize them and brainwash them. Um, so it's not that people are reacting to religious propaganda. It's that religious propaganda is crafted because it works on the population. So we still come back to this thing of why is America so religious? I just don't know. I can't tell you. I live in California, so I don't run into it. I don't
Yeah,
I'm
you're
in this happy little bubble of, everywhere. I mean, obviously religious people exist, but it's like
yeah.
I'm not running up against it every day here.
Something to always to do with the south of each of the countries. Like the south of Australia has this problem. For some reason, the southern people are always closer to God.
Yeah.
Maybe he's not above in the sky. Maybe he's in hell.
You'd think in the southern
Under,
hemisphere it'd be flipped, right? And it'd be
yeah,
something about being closer to the equator,
yeah. The north of the north dilemma. There is no such thing.
Yeah.
um, so I'm going to end up with what from here. You're going to continue obviously doing your a lot of people are commenting how much you've helped them with their with chemistry, with a lot of your classes, fantastic capsules of focus and concentrated material. You've helped so many people over the years. Where from here, where do you want to go? Are you going to start doing the educational stuff as well as debunking of pseudoscientists and charlatans?
Yeah, everything. I mean, the primary goal of the channel has always been and will continue to be to create academically aligned or curriculum aligned academic tutorials. So I'm working on about a dozen topics now, and we'll continue to put out those tutorials. But yeah, obviously debunking has become. I mean, I've just over the past 3 years or so that I've been doing it, I feel like I've been getting better, and I feel definitely a calling for it. I feel that I'm uniquely suited for it. I feel I have a talent for it. Um, and have the temperament for it. I think that to be in that
Support.
debate and remain calm was was challenging, but I was able to do it. So I would like to continue doing more of this kind of stuff. And honestly, like James is such an volatile. He's such a volatile character that for me to have performed the way I did in that, I feel like any of the Discovery Institute clowns, it just would be a walk in the park compared to James. I mean, you think that like against Meyer or any of these guys,
Oh,
like it would be an annihilation. And I'm pretty sure they know that, and none of them would ever dare try, sadly, because that would be a lot of fun. But yeah, I'd like to do more debates, and of course, I'm not going to stop. I mean, I have at least 4 more guys in the DI that I have to expose and humiliate because I'm having too much fun. And these guys are so stupid. Like you just if they would just leave it well enough alone, you know what I mean? Like if I just made that 45-minute video and James just ignored it, probably nothing else would have happened. But he just made that series, and so I crushed the series. He made another series, and I crushed that series. And it's the same with these guys from the DI. All they're doing is pissing me off by making all this damage control propaganda, like character assassinations on me. All you're doing is strengthening my resolve, and I'm going to annihilate even more of you. I'm just going to go through every single one on the roster and
or they
just
could be
humiliate them.
they could be a little bit smart for a short-term game because they obviously you've got over 2 million people following your channel, and they're like almost like a whimper, and they go,
Yeah.
okay, well this guy is quite famous, he's quite known, and we're gonna rub shoulders with him so we can just ride. Even people might disagree, but we might get a lot of people who are you know dogmatically inclined to believe in a creator, and therefore we get a bit of a free advertisement.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but also they're getting famous for being unbelievably idiotic charlatans. I mean, I really make them look really stupid. Whereas before, if you don't have my content as a guide through their lies, then they give off the appearance of being knowledgeable, right? And that's their whole shtick. Like I have a PhD in a completely unrelated field, and I'm wearing a suit. So, and I speak eloquently, so I must be right. And religious people fall for it. But then I have my content, and like if you search Michael Behe or Casey Luskin, like it's the top result. This is my video humiliating them. So I'm definitely very under their skin. They're really, really like they can't stop
I
thinking
can
about
see
me
it
and
on
talking about me.
Twitter. I know. I can see it on
Yeah,
Twitter. They're
it's
obsessed.
really funny. It's really funny.
They're basically every second tweet from them is about you.
These guys and it's not just the Discovery Institute, but each of the senior members will tweet it out, and they'll tweet the same thing 3 times. The same thing. It's just like, oh, maybe Dave won't catch this one, but I catch them, and I'll dunk on them, and then people will like my comment like quadruple as many times as the post. So it's
Well,
just like this is beautiful.
3 times is quite deliberate. It's reference to the triune gods.
Oh, I see. Yeah, everything's the Trinity to these people.
Dave, I'm very appreciative of everything you do. I've learned a lot from you over the years. You are one of my favorite guests when it comes to chemistry and biology. And whenever we chat, your calm demeanor is something that we are going to be. I mean, this is a legacy. What you're having in your channel, 20 years from now, you're going to look back and you're going to be very proud of what you've achieved.
Cool. I hope so. Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm
cool.
proud now. So hopefully
Yeah,
later too.
and I think the fact that you are, and I think the conversations you're having debunking charlatanism is becoming very, very important, because there's a lot of people who are not science educated, and they go to church.
Yeah.
And it's very, very important. I said we are going to be facing so many challenges in the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years, and we have the vast majority of the world's population have no idea how the world works.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be an issue.
Yeah, the divide is only increasing, right? What we've learned in every area of science, and then also the way tech is progressing. It's sometimes a little bit disheartening to think about exactly how few people understand anything that we know as a species. So yeah.
One more time, thank you so much for all what you're doing so far, and what are you going to continue to do. I look forward to more chats in the future, but until then, just be the great person you are. Thank you so
Thanks
much.
very much. Yeah, thanks for
Thank
having
you.
me.
All right. Thanks, folks. Next week, we are going to be having Dr. Michael Shermer and Dan Barker talking about the emergence of consciousness and morality. Did God do it? Or it's nothing but natural selection? Thanks for watching. We'll catch you later.